Well, I think the briefing for me started when I was probably about this high, getting paid £5 on a Saturday to go out beating. So the briefing definitely started way back for me as a child. But how it came about was Chris Packham, who is notorious in submitting petitions to Parliament on every issue that seems to want to be anti anything to do with the countryside, this time decided to put his attack back on banning grouse shooting. And there was a number of us on particularly the Conservative benches that were absolutely going to give him his run for his money. And that included me in my role as Shadow Farming Minister. And we had speeches from Rishi, from Sunak, from Kevin Hollinrake, a huge range of those that are representing moorland within their constituencies, and concluded with me absolutely strongly putting across the case that grouse shooting must remain for all of the positive benefits that it has, not only for our rural economy, but for conservation and indeed our shooting community as well.
It was a marvellous. Can we just give Robbie a quick round of applause, because he did do it. If you haven't seen it, well done. It was fantastic. It wasn't, I mean, what struck me about it, which was so clever, is you all talked about slightly different aspects of why grouse shooting was good. None of you particularly repeated the other one.
No.
I've got Greg Smith coming on a bit later, who was also part of this. So in a situation like that, obviously, you know about grouse shooting from being a kid, but what happens? Do you get briefing papers? Do you coordinate?
Yeah, we absolutely do. Look, you have to realise that in Parliament... So I've only been a member of Parliament since 2019. So prior to that, we farm as a family, heavily involved in our own farming business, and worked as a land agent for about 12 years before entering Parliament. So very much come at the role from the private sector, right? So Parliament is very much still, I feel like I'm learning, right? Now, when you have a debate that's coming down the line, like banning grouse shooting, you can't expect an MP to be an expert on everything. Some will say they are, and if they say they are, they're completely lying to you. But the reality of it is, you do rely on whether it's BASC or the Game Wildlife Conservation Trust or others, CLA, Countryside Alliance, to produce some really good briefing notes to help you put across those really firm points. So absolutely you rely on that. But also, you have to fight as a pack. You have to hunt as a pack and be willing to do so you're sharing those really strong points that you want to get across, so that you're hopefully burying this argument that continuously seems to be coming back. Not only burying it against the petition that is being launched against you, but making the point very clearly to the Labour government that we have in place at the moment. Because I do fear that whilst Daniel Zeichner, as the farming minister, indicated that he had no intention at the moment of banning grouse shooting, you're never quite 100% sure whether that's something that may come down the line. So I think you have to get those points across really, really strongly.
You had a Labour MP on your side who is a former animal rights activist, and he was standing up for grouse shooting, and that seemed to be... What was it, Rushworth?
So it's the Bishop Auckland constituency.
Yes, that's right. I mean, because he represents a grouse shooting, he says, I have no interest in shooting grouse. He says, but my constituents do, and therefore I'm here to defend it, which was magnificent. How did you get him involved?
Well, I think, dare I say, a lot of those Labour rural MPs are feeling a lot of heat at the moment, particularly from their constituents, because of issues like the changes on inheritance tax or D-link payments, SFI. So there's a lot of heat that's been putting on those Labour rural MPs at the moment. And when you have the good work that's been done from many stakeholders that want to ensure that grouse shooting can remain, and you've got these really good briefing notes that have been put across to you, even though you might not know the level of detail yourself as an MP, the argument's actually quite difficult to go against and go with the likes of Chris Packham that wants to seek a solid ban on grouse shooting. So I think there's got to be an element of credit that's given to BASC and the likes, the Countryside Alliance, that are producing those briefing notes that go to those MPs that may not have the background understanding of someone maybe like myself that has been brought up with country sports shooting from a young age.
Yeah, there was one question from one of the anti-backbenchers, and it was about what happened. So our side made the point about fledged hen harrier chicks. Hen harriers obviously at the heart of all this. And they threw it at Greg, and they said, what about all those fledged hen harrier chicks that don't make it to adulthood? And we're all shouting at the television screen, going, they just die. It's what happens to them, for heaven's sake. 75% of them die. That's the RSPB's figure. And he fluffed the answer. And I thought, oh, come on. So it was a bit like watching Wimbledon, really.
Yeah, and I think there's some hidden things that really worried me about the debate. Okay, so particularly, for example, the live consultation on banning burning, right? So the government's position at the moment, the Labour government's position is saying from the dispatch box, we're not going to ban grouse shooting, but there is definitely a strategy, I feel, that is about bringing it through the back door. The reason why I say this is because inevitably in the grouse shooting debates that I've spoken on, rather bizarrely, the debate always ends up going or turning around to burning peat, right? Which we know is not the case. And my view, strong view, having represented many clients previously wearing my previous land agent hat before entering Parliament, you need to have a range of tools in the armoury to be able to carry out conservation measures to manage heather and the woody stock that then exists. And burning must be one of those management tools. But Natural England at the moment are doing a consultation to look at whether or not banning should exist, where peat levels are at 30 centimetres rather than 40 centimetres at the moment. Now, if this goes through, this will mean that we can't then burn heather on pretty much all of the North Pennines. It will take out pretty much all of those moorland that is using burning mechanisms at the moment. So the thing that worries me is, yes, the headline might be there about not banning grouse shooting, but the Labour government may be looking at removing all of those mechanisms that allow us to keep the moorland in this condition, the healthy condition that it is at the moment, or the ability to expand the condition and improve it by not having that range of tools in the toolbox. And
that's not just conservation, that's fire breaks as well, isn't it? I mean, the important thing there. All right, you made some pretty harsh accusations against DEFRA officials during that debate. And I could see Daniel Zeichner getting very cross about that and very cross with you for bringing that up. So do you want to repeat that? What were you saying?
Well, so again, before I got involved in politics, my observation of government was if you're a landowner or a farmer or a land conservationist, your relationship with government is generally through one of the arm's length bodies. So Natural England, the Environment Agency, maybe the Forestry Commission. And some of those arm's length bodies do a really good job. Others, I think, absolutely have grown into huge monsters and have become uncontrollable in that a minister doesn't have the ability to hold those arm's length bodies to account. And therefore you see a lack of common sense that is being provided to the practicalities of policy being made and how it's impacting ground level management. So I was quite critical, actually, of Natural England because I was lucky enough to be a minister in DEFRA for a short period of time. Rishi Sunak made me a minister in DEFRA in November of 23 up until the general election. So I was in there for 9 months and got to see how the department worked. But I did see that as a minister, you had that lack of ability to hold Natural England to account and set the direction that you were wanting to achieve as a minister. And I can see, my worry factor is, if you don't have a minister at the moment that has done their background homework, that is willing to take a strong approach against the advice that might be coming up to you from one of these arm's length bodies, you are then not able to set the core direction going that it's in the best interest of the rural economy, the shooting environment, the sporting environment, whatever it may be. And my fear is that the arm's length bodies have grown into having too much control. And we see this Labour government wanting to give them even more power, because the Labour government are legislating right now through the Planning and Infrastructure Bill to give Natural England compulsory purchase power to acquire land, not at market value, but at agricultural value, literally legislating to disregard that hope value between market value and agricultural value, giving an arm's length body even more power Now, I am not supportive of that at all, and I think that's got to be robustly called out.
I think everybody would agree with you, but I'm going to land one punch on you, if I may. So they're giving it the big one about farm inheritance tax. It's £120 million a year, probably. They reckon they're going to raise from that. For the last 2 years of the Conservative government, while all other government departments were divesting themselves of land, DEFRA was spending £380 million in 2022-23, £350 million in 2023-2024 on buying family farms. So you were, I'm afraid to say, you were in charge of buying 6 years' worth of tax take from busting family farms over the last 2 years of your tenure. And now I would like to say to Daniel tomorrow, when he comes, Daniel Zeichner, DEFRA Minister, please tell me you've stopped that. How did that happen? How did your department end up sponsoring the state control of farming at that level?
Well, look, it's
not your fault.
No. But I'm just going to be honest in how I see it, because look, we had, as a Conservative Party, we had an absolute bruising at the last general election. Everyone knows that, right? There's only 121 Conservative MPs that survived. You know, to put this in context, I'm literally the only surviving Conservative MP in all of West and South Yorkshire, right? Now, I'm not saying we got everything right, but now is absolutely the time to be putting our case forward on how we regain that trust with the wider electorate. Now, with the mechanisms on inheritance tax, having valued many a farm previously as working as a land agent for capital taxation purposes, we all know that when you reduce the threshold to £1 million, remove the 100% relief for APR and BPR, you are effectively penalising the vast majority of family farming businesses. Indeed, family businesses. It's not just ring fenced to agriculture here, and exposing them to an IHT liability that will be huge and unsustainable to pay. Now, the government released the finance bill that came down only out into the public domain at the beginning of last week. It is hugely, hugely damaging, and the government are indicating no change whatsoever. Now, this, despite indicating it's only going to bring into the revenue about 500 million to the Treasury, which, put this in context, keeps the NHS going for about 20 hours. It's not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things. The government have got to realise the hugely damaging consequences that this will have not only on family farming businesses, but the wider rural economy that are all wanting to go forward on that. And they must axe the family farm tax.
Yes, I agree. I think we all agree with that. But I think my question was, Conservatives did oversee an element of nationalisation of farmland. I mean, okay, ask it in a different way. The government owns 650,000 acres of forestry. Now, we don't make ships out of it anymore. We don't make pit props. It doesn't underpin sterling. Why don't we sell off that, market value, £4 billion, 30 years of family farm tax take? Why do we seem to be stuck on, this seems to me to be a solution. Do you support the idea of DEFRA owning land?
My absolute view is the private sector delivers efficiency, delivers things that can be progressed far, far quicker, far, far better than whatever the state will do, right? That is absolutely my firm belief. We've seen that happen and been operational. I think you need to be in a scenario where the state, whether it's national government or local government, local authorities, have less control. You can get things delivered much, much better. And that's generally my philosophy and how I would approach politics. So if there is things that need to be undone as part of previous decisions that have been made, then let's talk about it. Let's properly have a conversation of how we enable those family businesses that will be far more innovative, far more entrepreneurial than whatever the state will be able to do. Then let's give them the tools and the ability to crack on and get on, and let government get out of the way.
Okay. You've got an audience that broadly agrees with you here. What do they need to do to make their point about inheritance tax on farms?
Well, so time is running out. So this is a piece of legislation that has effectively been talked about since October last year, but in essence presented now in its in the detail just last week. It will be debated in the House of Commons. We not got the right exact timings yet, but October, November time is when we think it will be debated. Once that's debated and voted through, that's it. It's happening in April 26. Cliff edge will happen, and that IHT liability will be exposed. I would advocate all individuals to tell their story as strongly as they can.
Tell it.
The media,
tell it, not write it. Tell it.
Tell it. The media, when I've been doing many media around and interviews, they want to hear, they want to engage, they want to be able to talk about the catastrophic damaging implications this will have, not only on those businesses, but the whole supply chain within the rural economy. So the media are willing to keep this narrative going. And dare I say, all of those stakeholders, not just those involved with ag, okay? The NFU, the CLA, the Tenant Farmers Association, the CAAV have been doing a really good job, unified in pushing this approach. But where I would encourage them to go further is make sure that UK Hospitality, Family Business UK, all of those stakeholders that represent wider family businesses to keep putting as much punch to the government as possible. And I just want to use a very quick narrative. I represent Keighley, West Yorkshire. Speaking to a mattress-making business in my constituency, employed 250 people. They've already worked out that their BPR liability will be about 800,000 already. The only options that they have is sell plant or machinery or change the ownership structure in their business, i.e. sell shares. They don't want to do that because they're losing control or reducing productivity within their business. The point being here is those inner city Labour MPs have also got to be aware of the damaging consequences of the IHT liability, not just the rural Labour MPs.
Very, very last thing. 12th September, this is coming back to Parliament, trophy imports ban. That is from the same antelope. So we don't get two-headed antelopes. One of them's real, one of them's a replica. They're banning the real one. They're not banning the replica one. Is there some way of getting across the stupidity of banning real trophy imports when I can do that?
Yeah, and again, this has been a piece of legislation that's been slowly working its way through the House. What I think, again, in terms of getting the points across, it's about getting. I mean, again, this is the frustrating thing, right? Politics is about numbers. Even if all opposition MPs, and I never thought I'd be on the same benches as Jeremy Corbyn and Nigel Farage, but that's where we are. Even if all of us vote together on every single issue up until a general election, we're going to lose every single vote. The point being, the real individuals that need to be convinced on issues like this are those backbench Labour MPs to add to the weight and the traction on key issues like this. Otherwise, the Labour Party have got such a huge majority. Keir Starmer, generally, if he can keep his Labour MPs in check and in control, can get through whatever legislation he wishes to do so over the next few years. So it's not only about convincing opposition MPs on things like that, but those backbench Labour MPs as well to get the weight.
Right, thank you. Look, if we can devolve the countryside from the cities, I reckon Robbie's our next Prime Minister. Thank you very much, Robbie Moore.